Greetings all.
Hey, hi. I have no idea how many people are going to be on this meeting, so well, maybe Rachel does.
Yeah, I don't really have a good idea for how many people are going to be here. I do know that there's a couple of people that are not going to be here. Julie is not going to be here. And then Dr. Greggs is not going to be here either.
Okay. Might be your show, Michael. You're
Gonna be
it.
a brief show if it is.
It's going to be a briefer show if it's my show, so we're in trouble.
Which may be the best meeting of the entire day, needless to say, for all of us.
That's right.
Oh, let's see if I got chaos going on here. All right.
Do we know if Jennifer Roberts or Bob or anybody else is going to be joining us?
Probably not. I know they've got their own committees, so they're kind of focused on their groups workings. So I can certainly, if this group would want to hear from them, can certainly get it on their schedule maybe for the next month's May's meeting, if folks would like that.
If we needed to wait on them.
No. I say we can go ahead and begin. And basically, the only thing that I really had was if anybody had questions about the certification, the process from the March primary. The election has been certified now, and all the records have been updated. So happy to field any questions as best as I can, or if folks can wait, I can find out information.
Okay.
Maybe ask Sarah, how did things go on your end from the primary?
Pretty good, I have to say. Not too many hiccups with photo ID, like the broad photo ID rollout. We did have some surprises with like projected turnouts and where were people voting, expecting more people to come early, but they all showed up election day in some certain precincts. So we had some significant lines and so, hiccups like that. But a lot of that stuff is really just a stab in the dark.
Yeah.
But I think it went well.
Okay.
Good.
Okay.
Good.
Yeah, I think, the preliminary data that I've seen, I think it was around 700, 800 statewide absentee by mail ballots came after the deadline.
Yeah.
While that may seem like a lot, it's out of 1.8 million cast. So it's a fairly small percentage. But I can certainly pull that data and see, who was mailing in late, if there were any specific trends that are at least evident in what the various counties received back from. And we can include that information in our report. My gut tells me that voters tend to adapt to changes. I think with things like the photo ID requirement, and certainly the change in the absentee by mail requirements, voters, for the most part, generally tend to hear and make the changes that are needed. But certainly can investigate any questions that folks may have on that.
I will say, talking about the number of ballots that came in after Election Day, I know we didn't track this, and so I bet the other county boards of elections didn't either. We don't know how many of those were actually postmarked on Election Day, or if we were still going by the postmark requirement, would they have been counted? We just have a number. So I've seen some stories about, oh, this number of people didn't get their vote counted because of the change, but some of those might have been missing postmarks. They might have, been postmarked after the deadline, and so they wouldn't have been counted. So I kind of wish we would have tracked it internally, just what those numbers looked like, but.
Because the only internal, just for folks that are aware, and Sarah, certainly correct me if I'm wrong, y'all track when the absentee by mail ballot goes out,
Mhm.
and then when it's received, and then when it's accepted. So
Yes.
there's a field for in the data file that is publicly available. There are date records for each of those fields, and folks can kind of see where their ballot was in the process. I want to make sure I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah, that would be right. So even when we were looking at the postmark, we didn't have a field to put that in. So there was never a data point for that. It was just, we knew that if it had an acceptable postmark, it was in the accepted group. And if it didn't, it was in the not accepted group. So, yeah.
Interesting. Did you get many folks returning absentee by mail in person, hand delivery?
Not that many, to
Okay.
be quite honest. Not like we saw in 2020. 2020 was wild with people not trusting the mail. But I will say election day, we had more walk-ins than I think we've ever had before, where
Wow.
people walked in and were like, oh, I forgot to put this in the mail, so I need to hand it to you. So just, I mean, anecdotal for whatever it's worth, but it was interesting.
Okay. All right. Good to know. Okay.
So, Michael, I'm just kind of curious, across the state, in Burke County, which is where I'm from, I haven't really heard any complaints about the changes. You know, as a whole. I mean, so across the state, are we hearing big complaints about the changes or not really? Is it pretty quiet?
I'll be candid. I have not heard major complaints or issues. I mean, I've seen WFAE had a report. I think another couple other media outlets had reports because they are able to access that public file and track the data as well. So I think that certainly that was something out there and was cognizant in the public. But I have not heard any, major blowbacks or, questions about it. Anybody else got any?
I'm getting feedback from somewhere. Is anybody else?
Yeah, I was as well. I think it's gone now.
Okay.
Other questions that folks from the March primary have heard or anything?
I have a question because maybe I heard it wrong because I was in the car when Karen Brinson Bell did her presentation a couple of weeks ago. Did she say that we only had 24% of our voters vote, registered voters vote?
That
That's
is correct.
unbelievable. I thought maybe I heard it wrong. Okay.
No. It was
Wow.
so in 2016, it was, I think, 31%. And in 20, or was that 2020?
Would that be the general or the primary? Do you
That
know?
was the primary. So
Okay.
everything was compared to primaries.
Gotcha. Okay.
But yeah, that was, I was thinking somewhere in the neighborhood of 25 to 30%.
Yeah.
But yeah, it barely hit a quarter of registered voters. And I've actually got the data from the voter history file, and I'm trying to do some analysis on that to see, are these repeat customers or were these new folks coming in? My suspicion is the bulk of them are probably repeaters.
Yep.
That are significantly engaged.
Yep.
And that's the typical dynamic we tend to see in the research. So, other questions from folks?
On that,
Yeah.
I'd like to chime in. Just I think something will be interesting to look at more from an academic standpoint, probably not as relevant for what we're working on. But in reality, we didn't have that many hotly contested statewide races that would
Yeah.
cause a rush out. But it would be interesting if we did have some hotly contested local primaries for Senate, state Senate, state House, county commissioner, sheriff, if any of those were on any particular ballots. I don't think sheriff was, but any of the other, that would have been interesting to see if the turnouts were higher just in some of those locales. And then
Yeah.
you could always tie that back to their board of election and their director of that particular area to see, if they had any problems on election day, because they may have been under more pressure than the state was in general.
Yeah.
That's a great point. Yeah. So what I could do is we can calculate for all the 100 counties the turnout rate. It would be a general turnout rate, because of the different parties and their primaries, but certainly take maybe the top 10 counties with the highest turnout rates. And I could email the county directors and just ask, you're one of the top 10 turnout rate counties. Any issues, concerns, questions that you had come out of March's primary? If I'm afraid to say, if you think 24% is bad for a general primary, the second primary, the runoff
Yep.
primary,
Yep.
Turnout will, if it even thinks about hitting double digits, I think that will be good.
Yep.
For a lot of these localities. It's just, under the radar.
Yep.
And, one of the questions that I got asked after the primary by a reporter was, should North Carolina adopt ranked choice voting for primary votes? That way you don't have the expense of holding a second primary, but you have the voters indicating at least a ranking of their candidates. And if one candidate doesn't meet the 30% threshold, you then drop the lowest candidate, you reallocate all of those ranked choices, and then potentially you could get somebody that gets over 30%. And then that would avoid the expenses and the, need for investing, I think, a couple $100,000 at least.
Yep.
For various counties to have early voting sites and then to open up precincts on election day that are going to be, in all candidness, probably mid-single digits for turnouts.
I'm just curious, Michael, because I guess you were living here then. A number of years ago, it's when I ran for Superior Court judge. So first, the state used that ranking thing, and it was rather confusing. So my whole campaign was trying to educate voters how to, vote. And I would just be curious, when we did that, how many people got it right, or how many people just didn't even do choices? Is there any way we could find that out? Were you around then, Sarah, when they did that ranking thing? Yep.
I was, and I remember it being really complicated to administer, but I think part of that was because our equipment and the machines weren't really capable of doing things the way that we thought they should be done, and to give us reports in the best way possible. God, that was a really long time ago. I do remember it, and I remember it made our ballot really long.
Yep. Yep.
So if you had that for every contest, that would certainly be a consideration, because whatever space we have for a ballot item, if you're adding columns over here, it's going to get longer,
Yep.
or you have to have fewer columns. And yeah.
I would not want to tempt that at any level. because it can spiral and grow to, well, let's do these races, then we want to do bigger races. And I have some serious concerns with ranked voting. I just don't know that that's a direction I would like to see our democracy go. So I would not want to tempt it, even in this circumstance of a minor. We kind of tempted with our early voting, and it has expanded. We were tempted with mail-in ballots, and it was expanded. And based on some reading that I've recently done from the Jimmy Carter reports from 2005 and a subsequent follow-up, they even indicated those were two of the most critical elements for potential fraud in an election. And so we enjoyed that early voting, and now it expanded. We enjoyed mail-in ballots. Now it's expanded. I'd prefer to curtail our expanding of things that I believe can cause issues with democracy. Just my 2 cents worth.
All right.
Yep.
On the top 10 counties with the highest turnout rate, Stephen, does that kind of address what you were previously asking about? And, you know, would there be any specific questions you would want to ask them, or?
The only, you actually expanded on it. Great. I loved what you're looking at. Take those top counties, get some feedback on them. I would be interested in which specific primaries were contentious enough to potentially raise the percentage of voters. That would be interesting.
Okay.
You know, was it a purely local? Was it a state House, state Senate, or was it one of the other potential ballots? I'd just be curious as to which race may have involved candidates that raised their percentage. I just think that would be the only other question I'd have. I thought it was great what you suggested.
Yep.
And I think we can get partly at that. I know that there was a considerable drop off once you got down the ballot of folks, you know, tending to vote at the presidential, gubernatorial level. But once you kind of got into the Council of State races,
Yep.
there was some pretty significant voter drop off. So, but if there was a local race that bucked that trend or something like that, that might be a way for us to kind of get into looking at the trend lines and the dynamics. So, okay.
Interesting.
All right.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Anybody else have questions?
I just have a question about from here out, our final report's supposed to be done July. Is that right?
Preferably June, so we can get it out to everybody by the July 15th summer meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. So maybe I'll hook up with you, Judge Wagner, and see, you know, how you would want to. We've got that form that all the committees will be utilizing as kind of a standardized form, but we can probably start brainstorming and maybe kick out a draft to folks at the next meeting of what we've covered, what our facts are, and where we can, you know, potentially, if there are future questions or potential issues to address from this particular group, we can certainly start to draft that dynamic. I need to get through, I'll be honest, I'm in the last 2 weeks here of classes, and we've got finals week coming up the last week of April. And so I'm going to be pretty overwhelmed with all that. But once I get my final exams graded, probably May 1st, I'll be able to concentrate a little bit more focused on this
Okay.
work.
And I guess if anybody, I mean, yeah, we can send what you and our thoughts are, and anybody, of course, can send any information or concerns
Yeah.
to you or me or
Yeah.
Rachel or something. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sure.
definitely. Okay.
Does that sound okay to y'all?
All right. unless there's a burning desire to stare at everybody's screens. Happy to, that's all I've got from my end. So,
Okay, so our April this is April. Our May meeting, you and I hopefully will have had a chance to talk and
yes, ma'am.
hit some high spots with the group. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that will be, so our May meeting
I think
looks
it's May
like
8th.
May
May
8th.
8th,
Yeah.
Michael.
Yeah,
May 8th.
May 8th. Yes.
It's gonna be here before we know it. Okay.
All right. I think that's everything from my end. So,
I have nothing.
okay.
Anybody else?
Have a good day. Thank you.
Thank
too.
you.
Thank
Good. Thanks,
y'all so
everybody.
much. See
Appreciate
ya.
it.